while this loads up, I will go ahead and begin our introductions. Rich Thompson is one of our presenters today. Rich leads Medical Solutions Human Resources Department. With over 30 years in staffing and recruiting, Rich has designed and developed talent, culture, performance, and leadership programs for tens of thousands of individuals across 60 different countries, and built strategic partnerships with 3 of the world's leading business schools. He's the author of the leadership book Relentless that focuses on the 5 C's of a strong culture. He will be discussing those 5 C's today. Rich is also a former kicker for the University of Wisconsin and later for the Green Bay Packers. Natalie Red Eagle serves as Director of Clinical and Quality Services at Medical Solutions, bringing nearly 8 years of experience in healthcare staffing. In addition to this, Natalie remains actively involved in patient care as a per diem maternal child health clinical mentor in San Diego, where she has worked for the last 10 years. She has a bachelor's degree in nutrition with a minor in psychology and a master's degree in nursing with a clinical focus in nursing leadership. We're happy to have you both here with us today to share your knowledge and lead a valuable discussion with everyone who has joined us. Rich and Natalie, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kristen. It's good to see so many people joining us, and it's great to have a partner in crime, Natalie. And we're really excited today to talk to you about retention and culture, but also performance and all of the things kind of in and around that and the lessons that we have learned. Just as backdrop, I don't know, Chris, if you go next to how much you guys know about Medical Solutions, but as one of the largest healthcare staffing companies, we bring 24 years of industry experience that positions us as experts, having access to a lot of different organizations, but around engagement and retention strategies. Our track record is endorsed by many partners, including 11 state hospital associations, which reflects our commitment to the healthcare community, but also our ability to understand the unique needs that exist out there across the different institutions. So we've collaborated with over 9,800, almost 10,000 hospital facilities. We developed a good understanding of the dynamics inside and outside the environment in healthcare. Gives us a great network that enhances our ability to effectively engage with clinicians, but also, again, the facilities. That ensures that we're able to tailor different strategies and talk about different things that kind of are across the broad network that we work within. We work across 1,500, almost 16,000, almost 16,000 clinicians that are on assignment that exemplify a tremendous expertise. That also represents a very large and diverse talent pool that again gives us that opportunity to gain feedback, to gain understanding, so that again that gives us this chance to speak as experienced experts in this space. So between our experience and our partnerships and our high rate of hires across the different groups, again, that's why we wanted to have this have this webinar to really have the opportunity to to talk to you guys, share best practices, and also understand, kind of what's happening. Hopefully, we can give you some tidbits. As Kristen said, my name is Rich Thompson. I'm currently the CHRO of Medical Solutions. I have over 30 years of experience in leadership and culture and performance strategies spanning over 60 different countries and countless organizations. And a few years ago, I wanted to write a book called Relentless, Leading Through the Performance, Relationships, and the Lessons of Sports, as a way of correlating high-performing teams and leadership in sports and business, so to correlate to both of them. And we'll use the framework out of the book that'll drive our conversation today. But before we get too far into it, I want to give Natalie an opportunity. I know that we got a little bit of a bio from her or from Kristen earlier, but Natalie, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Rich. I'm so excited to join Rich today in this discussion. I'm really passionate about retention and culture in the workplace, especially in the healthcare workforce setting. So as Kristen mentioned, I've been a nurse for over 10 years. I still am engaged actively at the bedside. and really fortunate to lead our clinical mentor group at a local hospital in San Diego. And I worked with Medical Solutions and in the Medical Solutions family now for over 8 years. I'm the Senior Director of Clinical and Quality Services. So I lead our team of clinicians that are engaged in all clinical quality operations, ensuring that we're connecting quality clinicians to the bedside so that we're providing excellent patient care. So that's a little bit about me. I'm so excited to be here.
And Natalie is obviously the expert in this space, and she'll help correlate again the theme that we'll talk through, but in the healthcare space. I think, back to the topic before we can move too far forward, the overall themes as I am doing research for the book from a few years ago, meeting inside and outside of organizations and talking to leadership teams and trying to really understand, why are some leaders more effective than others? Why are some leadership topics more impactful than others? And how do people get, teams to mobilize in a proper way to get things done, even with, or even when the message is the same, right? So why is this working for this person, but it's not working for that one? Why are people following this particular person and they're not following that one? And that's really kind of those key leadership principles that I found that became the origin, really the foundation of the book. What I've learned is, number one, is leadership is truth. It's being real, it's being authentic, not only to your people, but also to yourself. And if you can kind of use that as your beacon from a leadership perspective, you'll always be in a really good spot. I also have concluded that leadership is change. I love the quote, if you rust, you rust. There is nothing more important than being adaptable as a leader. Third, leadership is accountability. And accountability is the glue that ties commitment to result. And that starts with you. And it's super, super important. Also, leadership is resilience. I've built winning career through the basically outlasting quitters, right? And so I think we've all been in these situations where we've not only had to adapt, but we've also had to be super resilient because from time to time, things aren't awesome. And so it's our ability to choose our perspective to move forward and navigate tough waters and embrace the grind. And lastly, leadership is intentional. We had a saying at Wisconsin, nobody cares, work harder. And I love that because it's like, you just got to make it obvious. And so when you take all of those things together, it's leadership is the blend of truth and change, accountability, resilience, and intentionality. And it's through those principles that leaders inspire their people to reach their full potential, fostering a collective commitment to success and a thriving organizational culture. So that's really kind of the foundation of leadership for us. And now we're going to go ahead and go forward, but we're going to tie this more specifically back to the healthcare space. So Natalie, back over to you. Why is retention really difficult? And what are those things that you're seeing that are, maybe working or maybe not working?
Yeah, thanks, Rich. So I think retention is challenging for a variety of reasons, and we thought it was important to narrow this down to really unpack each one of these. So something that I've identified through the literature, through colleagues, through talking with various nursing leaders across the country, we wanted to drill this down to these three here, the biggest obstacles in retaining top talent. I'm really passionate about point number one here, flexible scheduling opportunities. So flexible scheduling, I just led a discussion on flexible scheduling last year as it relates to retention for the Nebraska Health Association. And flexible scheduling can be as competitive as a retention strategy as increasing pay packages, focus on mental health and burnout, which is also on here, which we'll talk about. But flexible scheduling is important because there are so many more opportunities for our clinicians than ever before, at least more visibility to them. So if you think about a lot of the med spas that are there, we've got a lot more outpatient clinics. There's a lot of AI work being done that big tech companies need clinicians for. So there's a ton of competition. So it's vital for us as healthcare leaders to really think about how we can incorporate flexible scheduling in our hospitals and at the bedside. And I feel like when I look at it initially, and others maybe feel this way too, it seems sort of intimidating. Flexible scheduling in healthcare, does that mean that clinicians can just like show up when they want to? We know that wouldn't be a sustainable model, but you'd be surprised how many of you already have this live in your facilities because self-scheduling is an example of flexible scheduling. So clinicians can choose their shifts that they want to work with some rigor around that, right? Because then if we didn't have some rigor around and guidelines, we might have clinicians not working any weekends or holidays, but at least getting some, giving that nurse back some autonomy to choose what shifts they want to work can be a huge win in the eyes of the clinician. And they can maybe make a sporting event that they've been looking forward to for their family. Maybe you have new mothers that are trying to navigate motherhood while working full time and having a challenging time with those 12-hour shifts. It's really challenging to find a daycare that's open for 13 hours, I must say. So having other opportunities to either maybe go part-time, PRN, or maybe there's a resource role that you can sort of work different hours, an 8-hour shift, maybe a split shift. I've seen a lot of creativity in this space. And ultimately what that does is people at different stages of life, whether it be new moms, or maybe it's your most tenured nurses that you do not want to lose that don't want to work 13-hour shifts anymore, they might be interested in a support role that they can cut back and work less hours, work virtually, etc. So you can really help retain them to mitigate some of these, retention issues that we're seeing. Career growth paths and skill development, I think this goes for across all industries. Everyone wants to feel like they have an opportunity to advance. They want real-time coaching and feedback. In a hospital setting, this may mean a structured mentorship program or preceptor program. Succession planning, really working with those that you have identified as top talent and making sure you're letting them know what they're doing so well, but also, opportunities to work on so they can continue to grow. There's also a lot of facilities that have partnered with different organizations to offer scholarships so that their clinicians can continue to advance through their educational career. This has been a really big win for clinicians. In addition to advanced certifications, there's a lot that's being done in the career growth path space, but we have to challenge ourselves as leaders to be so intentional in that way. Clinician burnout, overtime stress, fatigue, emotional exhaustion can absolutely lead to more resignations and increased absenteeism. It drives staff away, but this absolutely affects patient care. They are very much linked, workplace morale. And so I've seen some great strategies to address clinician burnout, some grassroots, such as a decompression room, maybe that we offer on the unit for our clinicians to take a moment of respite for themselves. There's also some legislature in place and a lot that's being done for, incivility and implementation of zero tolerance policies when it comes to workplace violence. Our clinicians and all of us deserve to feel safe when we go into work. So that's really been identified from a lot of our frontline clinicians and frontline leaders as a top obstacle that we're working toward to retain talent.
So really, really good and such a practical perspective. And I will follow up with what Kristen's chat is that if you guys have any other topics outside of the three here, that you feel like are big obstacles from a retention perspective, please go ahead, even throughout the entire discussion today, go ahead and throw those in there. So let's go back to just this notion, though, Natalie, of just culture, right? So just the notion of, because culture, we didn't just invent that. I didn't. But culture is really interesting because it's so hard to define. It's something that everybody kind of understands, but there's such a different wide range of understanding what that might be. And so the intentional construction or definition of culture is really challenging. I talk about it in the book as almost like the personification of a company. It's kind of like, what is the organization? If it were a person, if it were a friend of yours, would it be someone you would vacation with? Would it be someone that you just have a coffee with, or is it someone that you just tolerate with, over the holidays? And so let's talk a little bit about, if we can go to the next slide, Kristen, about this notion of culture, because look, the numbers are staggering. They're really, really difficult. But if we're just talking about leadership as it relates to defining and executing culture, Natalie, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think you nailed it right there. It is so hard to define culture, right? But what I can say is culture means, I think, something different to everyone, right? I think at the heart, people want to feel tied to what they do, and that might mean something different for everybody, but they want to feel valued. They want to feel respected. I like to think of Maslow's hierarchy of need too. We need to make sure we have our foundation before we can build upon it. So making sure people feel secure, right? That is at the core. And then we can continue to build a supportive culture in all of the different ways that we're going to talk about today. But I think that at its core, Rich, is what's really important to remember. Oh, you're back on mute, Rich.
Yeah, totally. And I think if you go even a step further, because we talked about burnout, right? I mean, a really big issue. I mean, it's a hard job, and it's for all the reasons. So how is it then? I would imagine there is an intentional approach to culture, but then the execution of that culture then can hopefully start to address, burnout and how do you keep people longer? Chris, the next slide, please.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts on this then, Natalie? Because you talked about it just a little bit, but burnout is really a massive key as it relates to, or I'll say a factor that relates to people not hanging around for longer.
Yeah. So this slide really resonated with me. Like, it's astonishing. 76% of our RNs say that they've experienced burnout in 2023. And the numbers on the right here, the workload numbers, to me, there's just a lot more to unpack in these. 63% of RNs report being assigned too many patients at a time. That feels a little simplistic to me because it's not just a number. We all know we work across different states, right? I work in California. We've got mandated nurse to patient ratios, but it goes beyond that. Our patients are becoming more complex than ever. There's more comorbidities that are coming into play. There's more their increased length of stay. So it is really exhausting on our frontline nurses to, perform in this environment without the resources that they need. So when I think about a culture that really will foster and, in the right direction and really improve these numbers, we have to challenge the status quo, continue to evolve as healthcare evolves. Things aren't getting easier. We're going to actually have more patients than ever. Our hospitals are bursting at the seam. We know that our pipelines for new talent is also diminished. So it's going to take all of us to, challenge what we've currently seen and make sure that we're prepared for this. And these numbers to me show that we have a lot of room to grow, though there's been extraordinary things that are already in place. I can hear it at all the conferences I go to, many of the leaders across all of our partners across the nation. So a lot's being done, but I think, we need to be, Rich, to your book, relentless in the pursuit of a culture, despite the challenges that we're all facing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And so, that's the foundation, right? So that's the backdrop that we're all working up against. These are the issues that we're running up against. These are the things that we're trying to achieve. So let's kind of then morph over into the book, back to Relentless. So, building a strong team culture isn't about grand gestures. I joke often when I talk about the book is we didn't invent a framework. We didn't invent an equation. We don't have any specific acronyms. And that was one of the things that resonated most to me as I'm moving throughout these executive teams and these leadership development programs and trying to study the effectiveness of leadership. And I had this full circle moment, this like, what makes leadership really effective is this relentless pursuit of the things that matter, not necessarily the cleverness behind the grand gestures. It's this unwavering commitment that is absolutely relentless and that's effective. And so by embracing what these 5 C's are, right? Courage, connection, communication, coaching, and consistency, you can cultivate a culture that fosters success and will create a long-term impact. It'll be sustainable. And it's not just about winning the moment, right? But it's about establishing a winning environment for the long haul. And a champion leader means this relentless pursuit of these 5 C's. And so that will be the backdrop of the rest of the discussion. So let's go ahead and move over to the first C, which is courage. Right. So courage is the foundation of effective leadership. It is the notion of facing challenges head on and making tough decisions, but also in having difficult discussions or conversations. Right. So this isn't courage as it would be, as kind of running into a specific situation that is life saving, or helping somebody that is that kind of obvious that you have to have big courage. But effective leadership, or having courage, is that small C courage, we call it in the book, which is the courage that needs to be present when it's not expected. It empowers the leaders to address these issues before they grow and before they foster into a culture of, that kind of gets just way off the path. It's got to be founded in honesty and strength. And courage and leadership, involves finding comfort in these uncomfortable situations. And it's crucial because it builds trust. It's what's essential for effective teamwork. And it fosters the extra effort and the commitment from team members as they believe their leader has their best interest at heart. And without that trust, leaders struggle for credibility and they become, unfollowable. So courageous leadership is challenging because it takes ownership, right, of our actions, and it holds both, again, ourselves accountable, but also our team accountable. And that's what, includes, the delivering of tough feedback for performance. And while that, look, no one likes that, right? Everybody, no one likes to give feedback on people who are not performing at the level they should. And it makes it uncomfortable. But by avoiding those conversations, it actually is unkind and it hinders growth. And, again, true courage is being transparent and it's honest and open, even when it's tough. But when it's authentic and supportive and on time, it can cultivate, again, this environment that people will actually, even when it's a tough message, people will actually become inspired by it and they'll want to follow that particular vision. And so, it's that I find from a leadership perspective is that when a leader chooses to not give on time, even if it's a nudge, feedback against performance, then the leader is basically choosing to say, look, my feelings and my thoughts are more important. I don't want to put myself in a tough situation versus putting my teammate or people on my team, kind of in the lead. So Natalie, what thoughts are there, as it relates to courage, courageous leadership in a healthcare space?
Yeah, I loved in your book the distinction between the big C and the little c. And it's true courage isn't about big decisions all the time. It's being open to feedback, making small, impactful changes. I really thought of a great vulnerability example I'd love to share. It's a good colleague of mine. She's a charge nurse. She was just telling me last week or the week prior that she had a really tough conversation with one of our other colleagues, a lactation specialist on the unit, as I work in a maternal child health unit. And it was regarding the patient's feeding plan. However, the discussion became tense. They parted ways without a resolution. They both felt a little unsettled. So the charge nurse in that moment, she's been a charge nurse over 10 years. There was another nurse in the nursing station at the time. So she turns to her and says, hey, did I not handle that well? Like, what could I have done better? So this nurse looks at her and is like, do you want my honest opinion? At that point, she's probably like, oh God, what's coming? But she's like, absolutely, I do. Tell me. And she said, well, to be honest, I've always found you really intimidating. You say things sometimes in a joking manner, but it absolutely comes off a little passive aggressive. And it's really hard to have a real conversation with you. This charge nurse, and instead of getting defensive, she might have been taken back a little bit, but she paused, reflected, and thanked our colleague for this candid feedback. And she told me even over the last couple of weeks, she's been really working on her tone and clarity and, not using humor to kind of get around being direct. And that was really like the key moment that I was like, both of you embodied this courage. You felt vulnerable enough and were courageous enough to ask, what could I have done better from your perspective? And I think of that as leading by example too, right? It's really impressive that one of our lead charge nurses was able to go to her floor nurse to say, what did you see? What could I have done better? So that hopefully it has that trickle down effect as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great example. And I mean, look, good on that person for asking for feedback, because there are sometimes people ask for feedback, but they really don't want to have it. I used to
Right.
work with a guy. He's like, yeah, I want feedback, but only the good one, only the
Yeah.
good stuff. Right. And so, but if you think about, how does courage tie to retention, or how does courage tie to leadership, or why does it even matter? And it's just that, and why we start with it, first of all, because it's hard, but secondly, because it is foundational, right? So if you can establish a relationship, I always talk about when I have people come work for me, I'm like, look, before you accept a job with me, you need to understand how I see my role in your career. And that is, I am here to grow you. I'm here to give you the things that you need, the resources, the access, the stuff to make this the destination that you want, so that you can get all the things that you need from your career. But that also means I need to give you some tough feedback from time to time and when it's relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Where it falters is if I hold back because it's like, it's not worth it, or I'm too tired, or I don't want to give them the feedback, or the path of least resistance. That's when that foundation starts to falter, because then at some point it bubbles to such a degree that it really becomes kind of personal almost. And then when you actually give that feedback, they're like, well, what the heck? Why is
Yep.
this person coming at me now? And so that is really kind of the essence of culture. Okay. Looks like we lost our slides, but we're going to keep going.
Yeah. No, but I
Okay.
agree, Rich. If we avoid tough conversations, the problem's just going to grow. And then
Yeah.
that impacts morale of, especially in a healthcare setting, the entire unit. Team
Yeah.
members really, they expect accountability, right? And
Yeah.
if underperformance goes unchecked, then resentment tends to build, which is the
Yeah.
last thing everybody wants when we're all trying to, have a positive growth-oriented workplace.
Well, I think it's one of those things that I feel like if there's feedback, either side, by the way, when people are talking, you're given the opportunity for growth. And I think it's part of it's the respect and behind the content, right? The feedback, more so than it's the, kind of wanting to be liked or only telling them the things that you want. So Kristen, just FYI, we lost our slides. But I'm going to keep going. The next one, then I'm going to go off to my side here, is connection. And that's our next C. And that is really important because, again, we've established this notion of trust in our foundation, but now more specifically to the actual employee is connection. And that's the heartbeat, right, of engagement. And employees are typically connected to at least one one of four different areas. And one is their boss, their company, their role, or their team. And the point to that is that as a leader, you need to do a check to try to find out why they are connected. But at the same time, is having an intentional approach to each individual to ensure that there are those connection points. Because those connection points are the things that are so meaningful, and really that's why they stay, right? That's why they stay on our organ or in our organizations. And because of the connection, it's just, it's a uniqueness that is created that they feel like they can't find anywhere else. And it is super, super important, because when there's connection, right, there's engagement, and there's satisfaction, and there's productivity, and there's teamwork and motivation and retention. And when employees feel that there's a connection, they care more about their work, they're more patient, they put in more effort, and the more connected they are, those annoyances that tend to exist in an organization, they will diminish, right? Because those connections will kind of overlay those things that drive everybody crazy. What I mean by role, boss, team, company is just this idea that my role, as an example, in my particular organization is just so unique. It is so different. It is so perfect. It's everything I've been working towards, that I don't feel like I can find that anywhere else. Now, I will tell you that is hard, right? Because there are a lot of jobs out there, there are a lot of roles out there, especially in this environment where there's the perception is that you can go get that anywhere else. So that might be a hard one, but it can exist. The second would be the boss, right? So I'm basically saying that if I'm connected to my boss, to my leader, that is a meaningful, strong relationship that is of high value, okay, and high commitment. And I don't feel like I can find that anywhere else. And I respect them and I do not want to leave him or her. And that's because I stay. Team, same thing, right? Deep connections with my teammates, great camaraderie. It's a sense of family and loyalty, and it encourages retention. That's why I would stay. And lastly would be the company, right? So the company stands for something that I feel like I can't find anywhere else. Now, I will say, be careful because there are a lot of people that are going to be on this call because I've seen them that will say, well, you know what? I'm awesome. Why would anybody want to leave me? Right. So before you become, as I talk about in the book, before you become the manager of mayor land or of management land, where you believe everything people are saying, is you just have to be mindful to create an environment, right, that you hear, not only you hear what you want to hear, but you're actually deeply connected and understanding what the organization is thinking and by individuals what they're thinking. Because we have to remember that every individual has their own wants and needs, they have their own connection points, they have their own career path. You need to intentionally engage each individual so that you understand what they're looking for. And that's crucial to improving engagement and performance because it really is, in the end, it's up to you as the leader to nurture those relationships. I once was asked, so what tool is out there, that can help me drive better connection? Is there an app? Is there a tool? Is there a software? I'm like, no, just open your door, walk out and go talk to people. So I know of examples in the healthcare setting where new CEOs will come in and they'll go down on the floor, they'll work shifts, they'll get into the grind. They really want to understand at the individual level why it's important to them. Natalie, how does that apply from your perspective?
Yeah, you actually just started to touch on it, something I think is really important when it comes to connection, and that's being consistently visible. Walk the unit. I like the boots on the ground approach. That really resonates with people. When we have some of our senior leaders, our CNO, our CEO come to the unit, and I think there's a couple different ways to do this. I think going one time without an agenda, just going to say hi, to check in, to be present, and then maybe in the future having, your managers send out a note that says, have everyone, I'm going to come down and I'm going to come see what everyone's up to. Can they prepare with, what's one thing they would change if they could, right? What if there were no parameters on it? What would you change? And just being willing to listen. I think town halls are a really good way to do this. I've seen in a healthcare setting too, having open forums in town halls. We'll touch on this when we get to communication, how many different ways there are to have that collaboration. But town halls can be great so that people feel like they can come ask questions and so that you can get a better, hold on what your employees are saying and what keeps them connected. Because Rich is absolutely right. It might be different for every individual on the team.
So let's look at some strategies then around connection and how that could work in different facilities. Natalie, do you have experience in these?
Yeah, I've seen some really, so from what I've seen for people in healthcare is the role in healthcare is not that unique, right? Like a lot of the roles are very similar, whether you go to, facility to facility. But I think, having a workplace that has something slightly special to add, it doesn't have to be a really grand gesture, but for instance, one of the local hospitals, they always do a doctor provided lunch or brunch actually. And it's so fun. All the nurses get to come down, they see some of their favorite surgeons, maybe some of the mean ones even that are in their apron, they're flipping eggs and making pancakes. Those moments are special and impactful. And it's one morning out of the whole year where nurses get to come down and sort of build that camaraderie, even with the physicians on the floor. Holidays are a great one to think about, making sure that we're celebrating people from all cultures and backgrounds. A lot of times in holidays, people are leaving their loved ones to come to work. So doing something a little special, or at least appreciating a little potluck where they can bring their favorite dish from home. I can't tell you how many New Year's Eves I have rung in with a bottle of apple cider with my colleagues in the break room. Those little moments make a big impact and you're connected to your team. And that ultimately, makes us feel valued and want to continue to come to work every day.
Yeah, and I think to your point, because I know you've done peer-to-peer recognition, I think also a program or a few, but
Yes.
I think the point to that though, Natalie, it's perfect. Is just it's the authenticity. I mean, I've oftentimes had leaders, or I've sometimes had leaders where it's like they've read it in a book and they're like, okay, so I need to go out and find out this, and this from the employee with like a
Mhm.
notebook, right? Or like they're making notes. And it's like, this is so fake. Please don't do that. It's
Yeah.
just that is not, it's not what's going to work. So, what about peer-to-peer recognition?
Yeah, I actually, one of the magnet conferences a couple years back, I found something that I thought was so incredible. It was implemented at Stanford. And we know that nurses and clinicians work so hard day in and day out, but the recognition piece has been challenging. Yet we know that we crave that. So this nurse in the Stanford ER created a QR code that was laminated and placed in every single patient room. It was all over the staff break room. And it was a quick 30-second, you scan the QR code, it was a 30-second survey. So you could select drop downs, how did Rich, how was his care today? And you could do incredible, like it had different scales. So you could finish it in 30 seconds, or of course you can elaborate on how extraordinary Rich's care was when he cared for that patient. And in the same vein, in the staff break room, all right, Rich really helped me today. He really saved me. He gave my medications for me. He did this, he did that. So I implemented that actually at a local hospital, and it is so incredible to see the fruits of that labor. Every week, there is a massive list of shout outs from patients, from peers, for all of our clinicians on staff. It's housekeeping is on there. I wanted to make it really inclusive to not just be nurses. So we send out an email once a week, and then we also celebrate some of the top comments in a daily huddle. So just making sure the staff feel like their work really matters, and that helps them feel connected to their why they do what they do.
That's perfect. Hey, Kristen, if we can go to the slide that says communication, please. So communication, thank you. So communication is, so we set the foundation with courage. Now we're like trying to connect with everybody, and now we need to learn how to communicate. And communicate is, I mean, almost unwinnable. It's so hard. But it's the key to trust. It's got to be clear, it's got to be direct, it's got to be on time, it's got to be frequent. And it is super, super important to understand that, communication involves more than just sharing information, but it also talks about the process, maybe the channels, but also the intent. I lived in Zurich, Switzerland for almost 3 years. And one of the great things that I felt like I learned living in Europe for a little while is this notion of shared intention behind communication. So half of it is what I say, the person who is saying it, and the other half is what I'm learning or what I'm hearing. So I'm intending to hear the right stuff. That is the essence of trust, right? Is when that communication or that information is being shared and it's got great intent, or it's backed by good intent, it leads to improved productivity, teamwork, fewer misunderstandings, but also just an overall positive organizational culture. And there's just, there's such a difference between communicating, and broadcasting, right? So I think people often get lost in this notion of I'm broadcasting information because of all the digital and the phone and the texting and the chatting and the emails and all that stuff. We're sharing more information than we ever have. But I would argue that people are losing the notion or the impact of that information because it's not done in a formal setting. So everybody collects and absorbs information in a very different way. We just have to, we need to have multiple channels to do that. Natalie, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think you covered most of it. Communication is just not about just talking, right? Or distributing a message. It's about making sure that message is heard. And everyone might have a different interpretation of how you communicated something. So it's important to round back and be actionable with what they understood. I like a good feedback loop. It reminds me, all of my clinicians out there will fill me on this, but that feedback loop in especially code situations. If you look, Rich, if we break down what happens, a root cause analysis after a big code, a big Sentinel event, often one of the biggest things we identify is a communication breakdown. So it is so vital, especially in the healthcare setting, that we not only are communicating, but making sure the message is heard. A lot of people just want to know the why behind changes too and the communication. So that's one of the biggest call-outs I've seen in healthcare in particular.
No, it's huge. It's huge. Let's go over into coaching, obviously now. So it's kind of like, okay, so we've got communicated, and now we need to make sure that people, have what they have what they need, and they're being coached up. So coaching goes beyond, thank you. Coaching goes beyond management, right? It is the investment of people, of the development of your team and in their potential. And so it's this approach of kind of showing and guiding and, supporting them, but for the purpose of improving their skills, which is awfully difficult, again, if you're not connected. But coaching leads to higher confidence, but also a greater performance of team. And it's those people or those leaders who engage, if you're not coaching, you're just a facilitator, right? And because it's essential to driving performance and growth and success. And those leaders that are, that focus on performance and progress and prioritizing respect over friendship or over being liked, those are the ones that tend to get the most out of their particular teams. But to do that, right, you got to have a little bit of inspiration, and it starts with having a vision, right? So even if you're a smaller group inside of a bigger organization, your team has its own personality, it's got its own culture, it's got its own goals or its own targets. You as a leader need to establish, what is that dream, right? What is that way of working, and what are those things that we need to accomplish as a group to establish a clear vision? You also need to create a winning culture, right? You have to foster an environment that is focused on success. And by doing that, as you implement processes, but also expectations, and you provide a structure within that culture to ensure that everybody knows what's expected of them, but they're also being nudged or they're being coached to that. With that is obviously you got to hire or align talent to the culture, and you have to manage the expectations. So just ensuring that our people are in the right seat, doing the right things, and they have a clear definition of what their role is. And then once that's established, is you wrap that up with performance management by offering timely feedback, both positive and negative, and again, for the purpose of growth, right? So it's kind of like making sure that everybody's growing, making sure that they have what they need to do better in order to be in a better position down the road than they are right now. And then lastly, I would say, is a good leader or good coach promotes learning and development, because ultimately no one woke up and chose failure, right? And so as your leader, or excuse me, you as their leader, you have to diagnose, why are they struggling? Do they know it? Have you given them all that you need to? Have you coached them up? And have you put them on a fast track to success? Natalie, your thoughts?
Yeah, I love it, Rich. To me, coaching is not optional, right? And it's absolutely a retention strategy. So strong preceptors, clear onboarding expectations, and real-time feedback will help our clinicians and our leaders feel supported and confident. I think about this in the small moments, praising a quick thinking in a crisis, connecting an issue or correcting an issue in the moment really shapes professional growth. A coaching culture really can foster better trust, engagement, long-term commitment. And I think sometimes leaders struggle with giving real-time feedback. So one of the most practical ways I feel like is just to make it routine. Every time you have a conversation or see something, just like that example I gave earlier with courage, modeling it and say, did I communicate that clearly? Did I do that in the way that you'd expect? And then in the same moment, Rich, you wrote something in your book that really stood out to me. You said coaching is not reviewing, it's viewing. Because if you're looking back on action, you're not doing real time. So especially for our preceptors and our nurses getting up and running, our clinicians being oriented, being by their side so you can give them real-time encouragement and then real-time coaching opportunities in those moments, I think is going to be incredibly important.
Yeah, and we talk about, Chris, the next slide, please. And we talk about from a mentor perspective, right? So because I know there are a lot of mentor programs and they take on a lot of different shapes and forms, and some are successful and some are not. But what do you see as kind of the key to, a good mentor program? And are they effective?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. They can be effective, or if poorly executed, maybe they're not. And then it's really challenging because it's a lot of resources that goes into a mentorship program. So I think the key is consistency and clear expectations, right? So laying the groundwork and foundation for what you want this nurse mentorship program to be, and then committing to it, giving real-time feedback. A lot of times we don't necessarily pour the love we need to into the actual preceptor role because being a preceptor is really hard. There's a lot of responsibility. Many of you that probably work in units or lead facilities that have a lot of turnover, our preceptors are getting burnt out. So we need to support them and make sure we're giving them all the tools that they need to be a successful preceptor for their preceptee. And then again, back to coaching and clear expectations to make sure it's successful.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective too is not everybody can be a good mentor,
Right.
just because maybe they're amazing, but they are not a good mentor, right? For whatever reason.
Totally.
And so I think you have to have, some sort of a process to identify, who is going to be able to raise up people and not just be the, kind of the answer person, although that's important, but also that you have a kind of a clean or a clear curriculum in what is expected. So mentor programs can be really, really impactful and important. The last C is consistency. So consistency, that is the notion of the relentless part of the book, right? And that is that it is essential for success because it reinforces the principles of courage and connection and communication, but also coaching. And it's committing to those principles daily that leads to the lasting success. There are no shortcuts, no days off. Those are the things that kind of are the identity of what kind of what's important. And, the characteristics of consistency is, establishing trust and credibility and just making sure everyone understands and has clear expectations and providing a stable but also a predictable situation where everybody has, enhanced accountability, including yourself, but also there's good flow of information and communication. It then leads to, a strong, positive organizational culture, which then has engagement, which reduces confusion and stress, which then promotes retention and loyalty. But it also very much impacts output and performance. And then you wrap it with a continuous improvement loop. So it's hard, it's exhausting, it's intentional, it's sometimes not fun, maybe a lot of times not fun, but it's the wrapper to the whole thing. And as you built all of these other areas that we talked about, if you don't, or if you're not consistent to them and you speak about it on a frequent basis, or you socialize it on a frequent basis, or, whatever that might be, then it starts to kind of wane and then it becomes hard to, kind of repatch it together. But consistency shapes the culture by influencing focus and discussions and measurements even. And it's the actions that align with those values that build belief, right, in your abilities as a leader, because it demonstrates the importance of consistent behavior, which takes on the courage and connection and communication and coaching. And so, I mean, that's really in essence, the culture, of the 5 C's. Kristen, go to the next slide. Because in the end, really and I'm generalizing, but really what our team wants is they want an opportunity, right? A place where they feel like that they can grow because they also want development, a place where they feel like they can make an impact, beyond care. So they want to be valued or feel valued. They obviously want to have a relationship with their organization or with their leaders. So they want good flexibility, right? So that they can, kind of customize or personalize their situation to it. And then you wrap it with fair compensation. I mean, in the end, if you can do all that and build that through the 5 C's of courage and connection and communication and coaching and also consistency, then we believe that you can foster a culture of success that'll have lasting impact, that'll drive engagement, but it'll also have a big impact on retention. And so with that, Natalie, any last moments before we throw over to some Q&A?
I think my last wrap-up statement is just that small daily leadership actions, showing up, following through, reinforcing values, those will really build the stability that you and your team need in high pressure environments, which I would pretty much bet that most of this audience is really familiar with. We know how unpredictable healthcare is. So just these small, consistent moments, as Rich mentioned, are going to be important in helping us lead through the challenges that we're navigating.
So with that said, are there any questions that you guys have for us?
If you have any questions for Rich or Natalie, please go ahead and drop those in our chat. We did have a couple come through during the presentation through our Q&A. So I'll go ahead and throw those out for you guys to tag team. Natalie, you kind of mentioned this at the end there. What are some quick wins I can implement to start shifting culture right away?
Yeah, I can start with that one. So I think the first thing I can think of is to listen, right? Like we can't create opportunities in our space without truly understanding the problem. So going down to the unit or having your nursing manager really lead those small sessions where they come down either with no agenda or with grabbing people and having them come aside and saying, what's one thing you would change? What's one thing that you feel like you absolutely love here? Because it's just important to know why people are loving coming to work, right? That can also give you really good insight. So to me, listening is like the number one way to do it. And I think a boots on the ground approach is one of the best ways I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think to my side is that, I'm supposing that most of the people that are on here have all grown, they're at a leader level, or they've been exposed to leaders. And so it's just identifying what are the things that they feel like, that they has been successful. And, because everyone has a little bit of a different culture. So what are the things that you like? What do you think? What are the things that you feel like from a culture perspective match what you're doing or also match your team, and then intentionally go get it. Just be intentional about what it is.
Okay, great answers. The other question that I had come through, how can I measure the success of cultural improvements over time?
Natalie?
Yeah, so most facilities that I've partnered with have some sort of engagement survey. So I think that's like the big broad answer is you can track your engagement surveys. But I also think it's important to do those smaller listening sessions I was talking to you about, or doing town halls, right? To see you can feel culture, you can feel subtle improvements in culture. I think you could also measure it by your retention numbers. Like Rich's slide that he shared, maybe 3 slides in, just moving the needle 1% in the right way for retention can save hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think that from a quantitative perspective also can indicate how your culture is doing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree. So I mean, look, there's promotion rate, there's retention rate, there's engagement rate, there's internal referrals, right? You can start to gauge that. I mean, you just want to, everyone wants to be a part of a party, right? So you can start to create an environment where people want to be, they're attracted to your organization or maybe to your team, and you can start to, kind of track that. I think this next question is a hard one. I'm afraid for it. I'm gonna give it to Natalie first.
I'll go ahead and read that one for you. How does a middle level manager communicate these concepts to get the executives to drive these ideas?
Ooh, that is a hard one. I think showing courage in this moment, grabbing Rich's seat and having the courage to really advocate for it. And also like lead by example, saying, hey, I read, I heard about this discussion, I read Relentless, and I would love more feedback. I'm craving feedback. And I think just by, that person, that middle manager being courageous and leading by example will help the buy-in there. And maybe it will do extraordinary things for them in their development. And that will be so obvious that they can cascade it even greater, right? It could be a success story. What do you think, Rich?
I'll give an example. It's great. And I'll give an example in Tulsa, right? So I grew up in Tulsa, north of Tulsa. There's a facility there. So I have my nephew works in a facility. And so He grabbed the book because he was interviewing to get promoted. And so he read the book and it spoke to him. And in the interview, he started having this discussion in and around the book and how it really kind of illuminated some ideas for him and gave him confidence, so on and so forth. So his boss, the lady who interviewed him, read the book, and then she passed it up. And now I'm speaking to them, I think, later in the year. So it's just, you cannot make leadership want to change, right? So let's all hope that at some point that we can just outnumber them by being the change and by having the courage, to exhibit the things that people want to be, to try to promote that. But I think it can be tough sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a great note to end on, not seeing any further questions. I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. We hope you found the session valuable and gained some useful insights. A big thank you to Rich and Natalie for sharing their expertise and engaging with everyone throughout the presentation. If you do have any follow-up questions or would like any more information, please don't hesitate to reach out. We will also send out a recording of today's webinar along with the slides later this week, so please be on the lookout for that. Again, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you all have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.